We are back on Morning Line. Thanks for joining us. Nick Barris here, along with Clint Kelly, Malpractice attorney. Phone lines open, 737-7587. If you have a question or comment about, malpractice, medical, doctors, hospitals. This is interesting. I mean, all right. The Ferries doctrine.
Yes.
I had never heard of it until Clint mentioned it to me a moment ago. We have a lot of service members that live in this area. Obviously, Fort Campbell and all of that, folks who are in the military. So there's an issue for them if they're suing for malpractice?
Well, it's a huge issue. The Ferries doctrine, that's the name of the case, was brought decades ago and was heard and went all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. A service member was trying to sue a hospital for medical neglect. Now, Ferries also had another case involved products liability. I don't want to get into that right now, but here's the bottom line. The Supreme Court said a service member in the military who's injured while in the military cannot sue a hospital for medical malpractice.
Now, cannot sue, or could they sue through the military court as opposed to the courts we have that are outside the military realm?
That's not a lawsuit. You can make a claim through the military, whatever the military is set up, tribunal, to get compensation.
You would make a claim. Okay, they messed me up. I can prove that they did this mistake to me, and they go to the tribunal and say, I need compensation for my pain and suffering.
Right, but there's no court.
Okay.
You don't have any rules of discovery. You don't have the right. You don't even necessarily have a right to a lawyer in that situation. You're basically stuck. It's like workers' comp in the military system.
Sure.
And so you're stuck with whatever the military decides to give you. You have no rights.
And by the way, this is not a military hospital mistake. This could be if it happened at any one of the hospitals here in Middle Tennessee.
If you got treated by Summit, Summit would be looked at as a contractor for the government. So if Summit screwed you up as a service member, you still would have no right to go to court and sue Summit for a medical mistake that could kill you.
I'm not sure I understand why. Obviously, you think the Supreme Court got it wrong.
I do.
But
the Supreme Court's rationale is they believe Congress intended that people who serve in the military should get their compensation through the military system as opposed to filing lawsuits separately, because people who are in the military give up certain rights, for things that occur in the military. Your Sixth Amendment right, your Fifth Amendment right, your Fourth Amendment right, those rights are different in the military. And the Seventh Amendment right is the right to try a lawsuit in court. And the court found that once you've joined the military, you've waived that right. You don't have the same rights as a citizen.
Okay, now
that's what's ridiculous.
Okay, I agree with that. On its face is just ridiculous. Now, but the other side of it is the reason this is an issue, I'm assuming, is that when they go to these tribunals, tribunal might find for them, but they're not getting anywhere near the compensation.
That's exactly right.
It's just not living up to what they should be getting.
They're being undercompensated, and just as bad, Nick, because I know this from representing, hundreds or even 1,000 malpractice patients in my career. They want to know what happened.
Okay.
Part of the piece, if you will, of bringing these cases, part of the justice is holding someone accountable.
Right.
And you can't hold anyone accountable if you can't even do an investigation through the rules of discovery. You can't take depositions. You can't do cross-examinations. You can't look at medical records. You can't hire experts. You can't do any of those things if you're a service member and you've been harmed by someone in the military who was working in a military hospital, whether military doctor, military nurse. Let's just call it a military mistake.
Yeah.
In a hospital, a service member has none of those rights. And I think that's wrong. And the reason I'm bringing this up today is right now there's a bill in the Congress, and it's a bipartisan bill. That's what makes this important. There's a bipartisan legislation to overturn the Ferries doctrine. That's what's called F-E-R-E-S, Ferries doctrine. The idea being that that Supreme Court decision needs to be reversed, and military service members
treated like everyone else.
Should be treated like citizens. When it comes to medical mistakes.
And you know of cases where military folks, service persons, have been messed up because of this.
I've had several cases of military service members who have had major medical mistakes at Blanchfield Army Hospital.
And did you have to go before one of those tribunals or anything like that?
I'm not qualified to do it.
You can't do that.
Right. I'm not qualified. So, and I also know I wouldn't want to do it because the rules that I get in a court of law, the procedures that I have available to me, the tools to find out what happened, to get justice, they don't exist in the military system. So you'd have to get someone in the military to represent you, presumably. There are some lawyers, I think, that may be able to do it, who are familiar with the procedures, but the justice is going to be so inadequate, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
So getting back to the original point, service members should be treated as citizens when it comes to the right to get justice from a medical mistake.
It's almost like they're being denied a right there, which I understand why there are some limits on their constitutional rights when you're in the military. Certain things have to be handled differently. But boy, if you're hurt, it's taking away the right that you and I have to get help for pain and suffering.
Yeah,
it's interesting. I think it's going to pass in Congress, and I assume the president will probably sign it. That'll change things.
I hope
maybe.
so. It will. What will happen is when people send emails to Marsha Blackburn or Lamar Alexander or
tell them to support
Congressman
repealing
Cooper,
the Ferries Doctrine.
Repeal or overturn the Ferries Doctrine. When people start emailing their congressman, this is the kind of thing that gets moving, it gets momentum, and eventually if you can get it to Trump's desk, he might sign it.
Okay.
But it needs to be done. It's something that's long overdue, and our service members deserve to be treated like citizens when it comes to medical mistakes. And think about, what is the policy reason for not? What good reason is there for not?
Well, that's the thing. That's what I'm trying. I was just thinking, as I'm sitting here thinking that it should be repealed, I'm wondering what's the argument on the other side. Maybe there is something. I can just think that it's insulating the military from high-cost settlements.
That's exactly what I think.
And if that's what it is, that's baloney.
Exactly. And how do you hold people accountable if that exists?
Right. And that's the biggest thing, too. Not only does it not get relief for the person suing, but that person who committed this is not being held accountable, and they're going to do it to someone else.
I mean, do you agree, Nick, there's some situations, some mistakes that are so bad heads ought to roll?
Yeah. I mean, we talked about that. You mean not just losing the job or being pursued criminally?
Well, not necessarily not criminally, but I mean, if you're in the military, you can lose your rank or be moved somewhere else, that sort of thing. You're not going to have the ability to do that if you don't have access to a court of law. Okay.
And with that in mind, that brings me, we've talked about how you get a case and what is medical malpractice. You compare and look and see if what happened lives up to the standard of care. All right, there's a lot of things that may not. Where is it that you decide it's one where heads should roll? How bad? I mean, there are malpractice cases and then there are malpractice cases. You've had both. Some of them, you've told me before, are so egregious it left you, even you, shaking your head. Others, you're like, this was wrong, we're going to handle it, but it's not. Where's that line?
Right.
What's really bad and what's not?
Well, for one, that case right now that's pending against that Vanderbilt nurse.
Okay.
That's one that I think heads should roll. And the reason I'm saying that is I'd like to know, and we won't know because there's no lawsuit, who's supervising this nurse? You know, what is it about this nurse? Is this a one-off, or does this nurse have a pattern? And also, what is Vanderbilt's system if you do override this medication warning system? What's Vanderbilt's fallback plan to that?
Right.
You know?
Well, and the reason then, I mean, that one probably hits it is because this is the rare case where a mistake's made and the district attorney now has charged her criminally. I'm just curious. I know you're a civil court, you know, you're a civil attorney, but do you think that case will actually go to trial in criminal court, or do you think, I know you're probably just spitting in the wind here, but I mean, or do you think there'll be a settlement?
Yeah, I don't see a settlement.
I don't either.
Because I don't see the middle ground here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see the nurse backing down on this because I think she's going to argue her case, and I think she's got support. And I don't think the DA, he had to put some thought into this, and he's like, you know what, this is to the level we have to charge her criminally, and he's not going to back off.
Yeah, where's the middle ground?
Yeah, I don't see it. It's one way or the other.
Yeah, I mean,
well, maybe she would accept what, no longer being a nurse and getting convicted. And maybe doing community service as opposed to maybe looking at jail time. She might accept that.
For a homicide?
Well, I mean...
No, I'm just saying, if you're the state, is that a victory for the state?
Yeah. And I don't know how the family feels about her being prosecuted. The family of the victim, they haven't said much, you know. And
they've gotten this far. I mean, I'm just saying, how can the state call it a victory if they say, okay, in exchange for a plea to a lesser offense, say reckless endangerment or whatever, if you give up your nurse's license, we'll let you plead to that. How is that a victory for a homicide? It makes the prosecution look bad. And on the other hand, how does the nurse plead to something like reckless endangerment when she's saying all along, all I was doing was providing health care and I made a mistake?
Yeah.
I just don't see the...
I agree.
You know, and both sides have good arguments. We've talked about this. That's why I'm saying that sometimes, Nick, there are some cases that have to be tried. I don't think the prosecution should have ever taken place.
Yeah.
But now that it's happened, now that it's out there, maybe it's time for this thing to be tried in a public arena. Let a jury decide it. I think I know what's going to happen, but let a jury decide what's going to happen and then settle this thing.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the country will be watching, because in some ways this can be precedent setting with regard to other nurses or doctors who maybe make mistakes and whether they face charges. And that's certainly one, if it goes to trial, we'll be covering gavel to gavel here on The Plus. Listen, we'll take a break. We'll come back. More of our conversation with Clint Kelly. The phone line's open. 737-7587. Maybe a cold, slow morning. You're just getting going with your coffee. But if you have a question or comment, we'll talk about some of the more common cases Clint handles as well when we come back. Give us a call. We'll be back right after this.
Storm 5 weather update. For weather on the go, download the Storm Shield app.